I looked for the price of this camera to see how much this camera is going to cost me. That's how impressed I was with the Panasonic GH5 Mark II.
Feel alive, let's hit the dance floor. Don't work too hard, might break a backbone. Return of the Mac, the king is back though. Corvette and cash, I never lack those. She saw the stone, you know how that go. Fatality, my diamonds that cold. Versace trunks, I hit my backstroke. Knock on the door, she at the back, bro. All I really take is a little taste. Island girl, blue eyes with a little bass. Here for the thrill, I don't need a chaser. Wanna vibe at the getaway. Shimmy, shimmy, yeah, I got the semi-four way. Don't step out the line like this a probate. You hit the line and try to locate. This for the time, got time for no day. One, too many, I'm going. Too crazy and I got bad ones and they ready. A good time, so now it's into it, we left that. Can't remember anything, but I know we got lit. Good times, live in the moment, feel like summertime.
Well, today is quite a good day because we are in spring in New York City. The freshness of original seltzer water, always great. Not sponsored, by the way. But anyway, let's get right to business. Today is an exciting day because what I have here on hand today is the Panasonic Lumix GH5. This is a micro 4/3 camera that I have here today. And let me tell you, when I first received notification from the Flight Fanatics CEO, James Earl, who has allowed me to test and demo this camera for the last 4 weeks, I was not at all, interested, somewhat, not in a negative way, but I said, I have full frame cameras like the Sony A1 that I'm shooting on right now, the 1DX series, various, have too many cameras. And I said, I'm not interested, in my mind, I'm not interested in a micro 4/3 camera. But, to be open-minded and, of course, be grateful of the opportunity that James has provided me, I said, sure, James, I would love to review it and test this camera for you. Now, let me fast forward to my conclusion of this camera, and then we'll take a deep dive into my thoughts of the Panasonic GH5 Mark II. I used it for the first 2 vlogs. If you noticed the vlog about the one wheel on my channel, if you follow my channel, if you're new here, welcome. But the vlogs about the one wheel, the vlog about the Insta360, that's when I first used this camera. And I was blown away. In fact, I was so blown away that I went online to B&H's website and looked for this camera. I looked for the price of this camera to see how much this camera is going to cost me. That's how impressed I was with the Panasonic GH5 Mark II. So let's get right into the details. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the GH5 Mark II right now with a Lumix 12-60 lens, kit lens installed on the camera. This camera right now, if I look at my notes here behind the box, this camera right now is on B&H on sale for $14.97, just the body alone, not including a lens, from a regular price of $16.97. Before we take a deep dive on all of the specs, let me let you know what impressed me the most. Number one is, out of all the cameras that I have in my lineup, I do not have a screen that can rotate like this, which makes shooting extremely convenient. Especially when you're vlogging or even when you want to get low angles, this screen makes this camera really, really valuable and really convenient. Another item that this camera really impressed me with is the IBIS. Now, I'm used to, Canon internal image stabilization, Sony's image stabilization, but I now understand the power of micro 4/3 when it comes to IBIS, the internal image stabilization, the in-body image stabilization. When you place this camera on, when you turn on IBIS on this camera and you're shooting with it handheld, you do not need a gimbal. You don't need a Ronin. You don't need a crane. I mean, the crane video that I reviewed on this channel was also from the Flight Fanatics. He bought the Crane 3S Pro. And quite honestly, if he's going to be shooting with this camera, he doesn't need to carry that crane. But if he does, he will have the best, most cinematic, buttery smooth, my favorite word, buttery smooth footage you can possibly have. I mean, this IBIS on this camera is absolutely unbelievable. So those are the two favorite features. I'm giving you all the goodies up front. Two favorite features is absolutely the screen, which is really high definition, really great brightness, great clarity. And then, of course, the IBIS. The IBIS on this camera is world-class, second to none. This camera is a 20 megapixel camera. It is a mirrorless camera. It is extremely lightweight. It's not bulky at all, like a standard DSLR camera. So you can appreciate the value of it being mirrorless and lightweight, especially at this price point. It records 4K 60 frames a second with 10-bit. That is impressive, guys. If you know specs about cameras, I mean, a Panasonic Lumix coming in around $1,500 to record 4K 60 with 10-bit is absolutely mind-blowing. I do see, the value in this camera just in the specs alone. Not only is it 4K 60 at 10-bit, right? It has absolutely no crop in 4K, which is extremely impressive when you think about the sensor size of it being micro four thirds. Typically on the full frame camera, once you put the camera on 4K, you're gonna get a crop, right? This has no crop on 4K, which is phenomenal. And this camera comes with V-Log. V-Log is their color, semi-flat color profile that Panasonic installed on the GH5. So if you're familiar with Sony has S-Log, right? S-Log 2 and 3. Canon has C-Log, right? C-Log 2 and 3. Well, Panasonic just has V-Log. Now, this camera, although I've only leveraged it during my testing for video, can absolutely take amazing photos for you. When I think about micro four thirds, I think it's definitely not something that you really want to leverage during low light and not have light assisting you, whether it's a softbox or any other type of light fixtures that you have installed to help you with your movie or whatever you're trying to film. I think that this camera might struggle a little bit because you're going to have to crank up the ISO and then you're going to get that grain. Although the grain might be a great artistic style for your video depending on what you're trying to shoot, such as a documentary or whatever it may be. But the camera, I've been using it for the last 4 weeks just for videos, like I mentioned initially early on. And this thing is an absolute beast when it comes to video. Not only because of the IBIS, like I said, not only because of V-Log, but also because of the different various encoding that you can shoot on. I am going to leverage my iPhone here to look at my notes because, I mean, in today's world, this is okay to leverage your notes. You can't remember everything about a product. But let me let you know some of the recording specs of this camera, which I found absolutely amazing. Like I said, you can record H.265 at 10-bit 420, right? You can even upscale to 6K anamorphic on this camera. Then you have your traditional H.264 at 422 10-bit and H.264 420 8-bit. One additional feature that this camera has, and of course this is all in 4K, and you can shoot in 1080p as well if you like. So another really valuable feature about this Panasonic camera is that if you have an external recorder such as the Ninja 5, right? The Ninja V, like we like to call it, you can connect it and you can record ProRes RAW 4K 422. I mean, that's powerful in itself. When I was digging through the menu on this camera, I had trouble recording it because this camera, you can set it at 400 megabytes per second. The memory card that's installed in this camera right now can't handle 400 megabytes per second. But when you think about, the bit rate and you want the absolute best video quality, I mean, this camera packs a punch when it comes to video. And that's the main point that I want to drive here in my review of the Panasonic GH5 Mark II, is that for videos, for the price point that you're getting on this camera is outperforming a lot of the other full frame cameras, other full frame mirrorless cameras out there. I mean, I think about the Sony A7C, I believe it is, right? Which is the mini equivalent of the Sony A7S III, I believe. I mean, why spend the money on that camera when you can get a Panasonic GH5 Mark II and have amazing video quality and photo quality? Yes, it's micro four thirds. Yes, you know, we're in a different era now where all these consumer companies and prosumer companies are focusing on full frame cameras. But honestly, if this is my first camera or I want a mini cinema camera, I am going for the GH5. That's hands down, I'm going for the GH5. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I actually went on B&H the first thing when I started using this camera and see how can I get into this ecosystem. I have all these full frame lenses, but how can I start using a Panasonic GH5 Mark II in my workflow, because I found it that convenient. Having a newborn out in my home, I don't want to carry with, you know, heavy and expensive gear. I want something like this that can give me the same quality, if not better, and I can just, you know, knock around and just throw it in my bag, no problem. So this camera has a lot of features such as Wi-Fi. It has Bluetooth. You can adjust, you know, all the full capabilities on this camera just like you can on a full frame camera. You can tune in, you can lock in your white balance, you can set your, you know, your exposure. I mean, you name it, this camera is not handicapped in any way, shape, or form. So what I'm gonna do now here is I'm getting kicked out of the park because it is 6:30 and they want to close by 7, so they're asking me to leave at 6:40. Unfortunately, I can't shoot any B-roll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to return tomorrow and I'm going to include this as part of my video clip today and continue this review, but include a cinematic reel of what I captured at the park. So I'm going to take a hard pause here. We're going to have an intermission. I'm going to show you a quick 2 minutes reel, cinematic reel using only the GH5. And then I'll come back with my closing comments and really, you know, anything else that I've missed on the GH5. So I hope you enjoyed this cinematic reel. All right, guys, so I hope that you enjoyed that cinematic reel. I am back here day 2 now. Like I said yesterday, I didn't have enough time to finish day 1 of recording with the GH5 Mark II. So decided to come back and shoot. Now, a quick disclaimer, the reel that you saw was, everything was shot on the Panasonic GH5 Mark II. But the only disclaimer that I want to add is that I didn't have a ND filter for this because of this lens is 58 and I only have the adapter for 67, and most of my lenses are either 72 or 82, I believe it is. But so what I'm trying to say is that the shutter was kept extremely high, and all the footage that you saw to correctly expose for the footage. The good thing is that everything was like pretty much slow pace, nothing fast, so you won't see any jitter. But in case you did see any like micro jitters or any rolling shutter on the film that I just recorded, that little short cinematic reel, it's because I didn't have an ND filter. All right, so let's jump right into my final conclusions of this camera. Is the Panasonic GH5 a camera to purchase in 2022? The answer is yes and maybe. And the reason why I say yes and maybe is because of two reasons. Number one, if you're looking to buy a camera and this is your first beginner camera or you're on a low budget, absolutely grab this camera, because if you remember at the beginning of this video, I spoke about two things, Vlog and the IBIS. It is phenomenal on this camera. Oh, and the flip out screen, right? This little flip out screen here. At this price point, it's phenomenal. 4K, 60 frames a second, 10-bit, as well as the ability to connect the Ninja 5 and record in 10-bit, but at 422, and also ProRes RAW. It's a no-brainer, right? At $1,500 for the body alone, it's a no-brainer. With the kit, I think it's like under $2,000 with the kit lens. So the answer is yes. I would absolutely recommend this for a beginner camera. Now, if you have the budget to spend a few dollars extra, or you want to buy something that's going to last you a very long time, or you want to shoot in low light, then I would recommend that you look at a full frame camera. I think that the G6 is full frame, and the S series, the Panasonic S series. And then of course you have Sony and Canon with their full frame cameras available. But full frame is the way to go if you want to shoot in low light. This camera, when I tried it in low light, there was a lot of noise. You definitely have to crank up the ISO, so you can definitely see the impact that the Micro Four Thirds has in a low light environment. Not that it's bad, but you just, you can clean it up in post, but you're gonna suffer from that noise because of the high ISO and because of the sensor size being so small. It doesn't really capture as much light as a full frame camera would capture. So that's going to be it for this video on the Panasonic GH5 Mark II. Let me know what questions you have or any comments or feedback on this camera. If you need help, purchasing this camera, or you have further questions, I'll also be able to help you answer those. I am going to be releasing 2 additional videos covering 2 additional Panasonic cameras that also Flight Fanatics have provided, as well as a Sony camcorder. Nowadays, we're always carrying mirrorless cameras and DSLRs, but we kind of forget about the video cameras that are still out there. And I have a Sony that also was provided by the Flight Fanatics James Earl as the CEO, and I'm going to be coming here to test that out as well. So look forward to that. So hope you enjoyed, guys. Until the next time, peace.